Let's set the scene back in 2016, a balmy summer day casting its warmth upon everything. Taking advantage of a break from both school and work, I ventured out for a leisurely stroll, relishing the freedom to simply enjoy the fresh air and clear my mind. Escaping the confines of both work and school was always a welcome reprieve for me. My job didn't bring much joy, and I found myself navigating the social landscape of school as something of a lone wolf, facing the all-too-familiar sting of bullying from my peers. It's no wonder I harbored a certain disdain for the school environment, but I digress. Let's get back to the tale at hand. As I meandered along a tranquil trail, lost in my thoughts, I suddenly caught a sound emanating from the dense woods nearby. Initially, the rustling in the woods didn't strike me as anything out of the ordinary. It could have been just a squirrel scampering about, or perhaps a bird chirping its song. Such sounds were commonplace in the great outdoors. However, as time passed, the noise persisted, growing louder and more distinct. It seemed to be keeping pace with my own footsteps, moving in sync with me along the trail. Despite this, I remained unperturbed, continuing my leisurely stroll without giving the situation much thought. Approaching a sharp bend in the trail, I rounded the corner, only to come face to face with an unexpected sight. A figure, unmistakably dressed as a clown, standing directly in my path. Caught off guard, I paused in my tracks, my gaze locked on the eerie figure blocking my way. Perhaps you're familiar with it, but let's jog your memory just in case. Back in 2016, there was this massive trend sweeping across the globe, particularly in the United States. People donning clown costumes, popping up in all sorts of places. It was quite the spectacle. Now, most of these folks were just harmless teenagers, caught up in the thrill of trying to spook unsuspecting passersby and get a few laughs. But lurking among them were individuals with far more sinister motives. I've caught wind of some truly chilling tales on the news, reports of clowns caught in the act, attempting kidnappings or inflicting harm on innocent folks. It's enough to send shivers down your spine. So, there I was, face to face with this clown, feeling a surge of unease wash over me. But I refused to let him see my fear. I mean, what were the odds he had any sinister intentions, right? Still, I kept my guard up, just in case. He didn't appear armed, and I felt confident I could handle myself if things took a turn for the worse. We exchanged awkward glances, neither of us uttering a word until I mustered up the courage to break the silence. "Hello, who are you?" I ventured, keeping my tone steady. That was the extent of our exchange. At that moment, I realized it was high time I made my exit. The man stood before me, his gaze unyielding, not a single muscle twitching. Slowly, he began to advance, and instinctively, I retreated a few steps, keeping a wary eye on him. But then, a sudden resolve surged within me. I refused to let him see my fear. With a newfound determination, I matched his stride, moving towards him. As we closed the distance between us, my heart pounded with increasing intensity. It felt like an eternity until, finally, he came to a halt mere inches away. Despite my racing pulse, I pressed on, not once daring to glance back over my shoulder. A chuckle bubbled up from within as I realized I had passed him completely, leaving him behind without a second thought. It dawned on me that I had worked myself up for nothing. Completing my walk without further incident, I returned home and settled in to prepare dinner. But as the evening wore on, a nagging sensation tugged at my senses as if something lurked just beyond my awareness, waiting to be discovered. Stepping into my living room, I slid open the glass door and peered out into the backyard, scanning the area intently. Not a soul in sight, yet there were plenty of spots where someone could easily hide from my vantage point. Brushing off the unease creeping into my mind, I dismissed it as mere paranoia and returned indoors, locking the door securely behind me. Continuing with dinner preparations, I was abruptly jolted by a loud, forceful knock echoing from the kitchen window. I recoiled in shock, my heart pounding wildly as I involuntarily collided with the cupboard overhead. Panic gripped me in its suffocating embrace, my breaths coming in short, frantic gasps. In that moment, fear consumed me like never before. It was a visceral, bone-chilling terror, unlike anything I had ever experienced. Grabbing the knife within reach, I hurried to the window, straining to see through the darkness cloaking the outside. With no luck, I dashed to the back patio light switch and flicked it on, illuminating the area in a sudden burst of brightness. In that instant, before I could even slide open the glass door, there he was, the same menacing clown, mere feet away, his presence sending a shiver down my spine. Looking back, I wish I had acted on impulse, maybe brandished the knife or at least attempted to scare him off. But fear can paralyze even the bravest souls, and in that moment, I was frozen in place. It's easy to speculate about how you'd react in a situation like this, but the truth is, you never truly know until you're faced with it. Racing upstairs to my bedroom, I bolted the door and dialed the police, the relentless knocking echoing ominously even from the safety of my room. As the relentless knocking persisted, I was gripped by a sense of dread and confusion. Who could be behind this harassment, and how did they even know where I lived? The unsettling thought lingered that perhaps it was someone familiar, adding an extra layer of personal horror to the situation. As I anxiously awaited the arrival of the police, each passing minute felt like an eternity. But to my relief, they arrived on the scene surprisingly quickly, within a mere 10 minutes or so. Yet, even with their presence, the deafening knocks continued to reverberate, growing louder and more ominous with each passing moment. Then, amidst the chaos, came the chilling sound of the clown's laughter, a delirious, unhinged cacophony that sent shivers down my spine. In that moment, engulfed by fear and uncertainty, I couldn't help but feel as though I was teetering on the brink of something far more sinister. Every second felt like an eternity as I braced myself for the worst, convinced that at any moment the intruder would breach my home and launch an attack. The mere thought of having to defend myself sent a shiver down my spine. I couldn't shake the nagging fear that if he really wanted to, he could easily smash through any of my windows and force his way inside. The vulnerability of my home felt like a gaping chasm, leaving me on edge and hyper-aware of every creak and groan. Finally, the distant wail of police sirens offered a glimmer of hope, signaling the imminent arrival of help. Within moments, the officers were at my doorstep, their authoritative presence a welcome relief. Hastening to unlock the door, I cautiously peered through the peephole, ensuring it was indeed the police before letting them in. Once inside, I relayed the situation to the officer, while the rest of the team fanned out in search of the elusive clown, their swift actions instilling a newfound sense of security. To my disbelief, the clown had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a lingering sense of unease. Yet, I choose to view it as out of sight, out of mind, perhaps the best way to cope with such a disturbing encounter. Since then, I've had no further run-ins with clowns or anyone else for that matter. Reflecting on this harrowing ordeal, it's hard to fathom that it actually happened to me. It's a stark reminder that we never truly expect such horrors to befall us until they do. If not for the swift response of the police, the outcome could have been far more dire. In this instance, those officers truly saved my life.
A few months back, on a crisp spring evening, I found myself sound asleep in my house. It was just me, as my husband was away on a business trip for the weekend. Suddenly, in the dead of night, around 1 a.m., I was jolted awake. What had disturbed my slumber, I couldn't say, but I was wide awake in an instant. As I sat up in bed, scanning the dimly lit room, my gaze landed on the bedroom window. There, illuminated in the darkness, was a clown's face staring right back at me. This wasn't someone in a typical clown mask. No, this person had meticulously painted their face to resemble a clown, and they'd done quite a convincing job. My initial reaction was a scream, and as soon as the clown noticed, they vanished into the night, leaving me trembling with fear. I wasted no time. Grabbing my phone, I dialed my husband's number. Fortunately, he picked up. He urged me to contact the authorities. So still on the line with him, I mustered the courage to approach the window and peer outside. The clown had vanished from view, and I strained to catch any sign of him through the window, but he was nowhere to be seen. However, as I continued scanning our front yard, a chilling sound shattered the silence. The unmistakable noise of glass breaking, echoing from the opposite end of the house. Dread flooded my senses. Without hesitation, I ended my call with my husband and dialed the police. As I waited for them to answer, panic urging me on, I sprinted to my bedroom door, slamming it shut and bolting it tight. Inside, the house seemed to come alive with sinister activity. The sound of movement, followed by a man's eerie, hysterical laughter, sent shivers down my spine. It was a moment of pure, bone-chilling terror. On the line with the police, I pleaded for them to hurry. They assured me they were on their way, and I clung to their words, grateful for the lifeline, as I braced myself for whatever horrors awaited within those walls. The unsettling sound of the clown's footsteps echoed through the house, drawing nearer with each passing moment, accompanied by his haunting laughter. With every step, my dread intensified, knowing that he was edging closer to my sanctuary, my bedroom. I held my breath, waiting for the inevitable moment when he would reach my door. Eventually, he arrived at the hallway outside, his presence looming ominously. Perhaps he diverted to another room initially, but soon enough, his steps approached the end of the hallway, right outside the very room I was in. For a brief, tense moment, silence enveloped the house. Then his eerie laughter pierced through the stillness, sending chills down my spine. He was right outside my door, and I braced myself for whatever would come next, my heart pounding in my chest as I prayed for the police to arrive swiftly. I crept away from the door as quietly as possible, putting as much distance between myself and the potential threat. Just as I positioned myself out of sight, I noticed the doorknob begin to turn. A wave of relief washed over me as I realized the door was securely locked. Then came 3 calm knocks, followed by a subdued chuckle. A moment of eerie silence settled over the room before chaos erupted once more. The clown began to pound on the door with alarming force, as if trying to break through with sheer willpower alone. His persistence bordered on madness, sending shivers down my spine. I was reassured that the police were mere moments away, but every second felt like an eternity as the relentless pounding continued. Just when I feared I couldn't endure it any longer, a glimmer of hope appeared outside the window. The flashing lights of the police car pierced through the darkness, accompanied by the blare of a siren drawing closer. As the cacophony of sound reached its peak, the banging abruptly ceased, replaced by an eerie calm. The police had arrived, and soon after, they gained entry to the house. With their presence, I finally felt safe enough to leave the confines of my room. Yet to my dismay, the clown had vanished without a trace. The intruder had slipped away through the back door, leaving it gaping wide open in his wake. Despite the thorough search conducted by the police, he had vanished without a trace. All they discovered was a solitary clue, a bright red rubber nose abandoned in our backyard, mocking us with its presence. Thankfully, my husband returned home the following day, providing a much-needed sense of security. From then on, whenever he had to travel for work, I made sure to accompany him. Yet even now, several months later, the memory of that harrowing night still lingers, and the fear of the clown's potential return continues to haunt me.